187 tons on this level road.
Only Ford has independent front suspension for...
They don't make them like they used to. Well, that's what people say, at least. And then you look around at how much every single car on the market has changed in the last 30 to 40 years, and you think, well, shit, I guess that's true. But what if someone actually tried to make them like they used to? That's essentially what we've got here with the Ineos Grenadier. It's a trip back in time to rugged, capable, single-purpose 4x4s built for a world that still had blank spaces on the map to explore. There's just one thing. Even after Ineos lowered the price last month, it still costs $72,600. Why? Is Ineos just price gouging rich people who want to feel tough? Or is building and selling a simple vehicle in the modern world not as simple as we think? Actually, I've got a sneaky feeling the reason the Grenadier costs as much as a Mercedes E-Class has been decades in the making. So now, we're gonna go beat this thing up. We're not gonna stop until we get some answers. The Grenadier is the perfect example to talk about something that is seemingly missing from all vehicles these days: simplicity. I'm not out on this trail to tell you how good the Grenadier is off-road or whether the seats are comfy enough. They're not, by the way. I'm here to see if, a quarter of the way through the new century, we can truly have a simple vehicle. At its core, the Grenadier is a body-on-frame SUV with solid axles, 3 locking differentials, and a lot of switches and knobs inside. It's powered by a detuned version of BMW's B58 turbo inline-6 engine. It's detuned because the folks at Ineos want to understress the engine for reliability and to be more tolerant of poor fuel quality. This is a big one, because if you're on safari in Africa or punching through the jungles of South America, most modern turbo engines will run like crap on those fuels. Or worse, they won't even run at all. The rest of the off-road segment is going in a completely different direction. 4x4s like the once mighty Land Cruiser have gone to a hybrid drivetrain. This makes sense if you expect your customers to stick to the road, because hybrids offer vastly superior fuel economy and reduced emissions. Unfortunately, they're also temperamental, complicated, and harder to repair by the side of the trail. The thing that sets the Grenadier apart is its lack of electronics. There's no ventilated seats, no active suspension, hydraulic power steering. Its biggest conceits are the infotainment system and an off-road mode button. But all that does is deactivate the stability control, let you lock the diffs, and drive with your seatbelt off and the door open. There is no special traction program like you'd find in a Land Rover or Land Cruiser, no crawl control like you'd find in a 4Runner or Tacoma. But having as much tech as a Commodore 64 cuts both ways. These kinds of technologies democratize off-roading, lowering the bar for skill. This is one of the things that has made stock off-roaders with poor suspension travel and compromised design seem more capable than they would otherwise be mechanically. In the Grenadier, if you don't know what you're doing, you can get into trouble pretty quickly. Despite its capabilities, it's not as tolerant of mistakes as other modern SUVs. But when you know what you're doing, I mean, it'll take you almost anywhere.
Now you can start coming this way, yeah.
All right, so the Grenadier's interior, it's quite Spartan, let's just say that, compared to everything else in the price range especially. Got a lot of hard plastics, painted metal, rubber. Feels pretty bare compared to the competition. But all of that is done in the name of reliability, durability, and holding up to extended use over long periods of time. I mean, isn't that the point of an SUV? Ineos did all this to limit the number of ECUs that would be required in the vehicle. Again, reliability. So there's no push-button start, there's no passive key fob entry, even the windows. They have an auto down function, but not an auto up. And that's because that would require 2 more ECUs, one to control the motion and another to stop it from chopping your fingers off. It feels like this is exactly what we've been asking for from OEMs for the last 2 decades. Keep it simple, make it durable. Complex systems are driving up the cost of manufacturing vehicles, and when they break down, it increases the cost of maintaining those vehicles, right? So despite the fact that the Grenadier skipped all of those, why does it still cost over $72,000? Or to phrase that differently, why does the Grenadier cost that much when less than 10 years ago, the base Land Rover Defender sold for $38,000? The reason why the Defender is such an easy comp here is because that's actually what the billionaire CEO of Ineos, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, set out to build. And I'm not talking about the current Defender we get in the US, I'm talking about the original one that was sold in other markets as late as 2016. Just like the Grenadier, it was a hard-as-nails, no-nonsense 4x4 that was offered with an array of engines, including a BMW Source Straight 6. The story goes that Sir Jim was particularly bummed when Land Rover announced the end of production for its original Defender model back in 2017. He loved its rugged simplicity. The guy can't say no to a Safari, I guess. So, because he's a billionaire, he asked Jaguar Land Rover if he could buy the tooling for the old Defender so he could keep it in production in some fashion. JLR said, no way. And so, again, being a billionaire, he decided, I'm just going to make my own version. When the Grenadier finally arrived for the 2023 model year, it had a base MSRP of $71,500 before shooting up to $80,000 earlier this year because of tariffs. Now it's back down to $72,600, probably because sales suffered. Anyway, where does all that extra cost come from? Well, part of it comes from Ineos just being new to the market. The Defender was in production for decades and was being built by a well-established company with supply chains in place. Ineos is a major conglomerate that's been around for years in chemicals and oil, but this is its first car. The larger part is also the reason the Defender wasn't on sale in the US after 1997, US emissions regulations. In 1990, the Clean Air Act was amended and a progression of tiered standards began to roll out. These standards were progressively more strict, and the Tier 1 standards were in full effect by 1997. The original Defender didn't meet those standards. It would have taken significant modifications for the Defender to continue to be US legal, and it was deemed too expensive for Land Rover to change the Defender just for the US markets. The Grenadier is a version of the Defender that actually meets those Tier 1 standards, and much more, because now we're on to Tier 4. Then there are the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, or FMVSS. The 1998 model year also required dual front airbags on all passenger vehicles. And today, vehicles require more complicated electronics than just two basic airbags. ABS, stability control, backup cameras, the list goes on. And that's not to mention the intensive crash testing that vehicles have to go through. Another example that might help put this into perspective is the modern-day 70 Series Toyota Land Cruiser, which has barely changed since the 1980s. It's lauded for its capability and simplicity. And even using decades-old assembly lines from one of the biggest auto manufacturers in the world and not having to meet US regulations, the base model still sells in Australia for $75,000 dues, or the equivalent of $50,000 here. In the US, the idea of a simple car is no longer synonymous with it being cheap, because with all the requirements and regulations that a car has to meet, it's either loaded down with expensive components or it has to be significantly compromised to find a cheap way to meet those regulations. Things like automatic emergency braking might seem unnecessary to purists, but even that is going to be required by 2029 to get a vehicle on American roads. So for a first-gen Defender or a 70 Series Land Cruiser to be sold in the US today by a company with a low production volume, $72,000 might actually be what it needs to cost. And this highlights a real problem in the car market. Because we've assumed we're getting charged more for more complex cars, but when a company like Ineos makes a truck that's essentially from the 90s, they can't make it come with 90s regulations, or a 90s economy, or 90s gas prices, or 90s airport security, or 90s. And this brings up another point. Because we've not only seen the passing of the simple car, we're also witnessing the passing of the second car. As we've all recently learned the hard way, inflation is not equivalent to buying power, and it's not the sole factor dictating how people spend. What the average person was willing to spend on the car in the 90s is not the same as what the average person can spend today. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was more common for a household to have more cars than it had people with jobs. a practical daily for commuting, and another car that was more uniquely fit for weekend activities like canyon carving or towing a boat to the lake. The trope of people buying a Corvette as a midlife crisis wasn't about them trading in their daily for that. It was about buying a second car. As an enthusiast, that might not sound weird to you, but how many regular people do you know that have a weekend car today? Because people were more likely to own multiple cars, the cars themselves were more specialized. Off-roaders were more focused on just off-roading. Sports cars were more focused on just being sporty. But as times changed, so did the markets. More and more cars became compromised because they needed to be more of an all-rounder. Your two-seat roadster needed to be comfy enough for your daily commute. Your fun off-roader needed to be soft enough for the kids to fall asleep in the backseat during a road trip. Manufacturers were having a harder time selling a car that was only good at one thing because less and less people could justify having more than one car. Fast forward to 2025, and we have a market full of crossover SUVs that are rolling monoliths of compromise. Too small for drywall sheets, but too big to be nimble on a twisty road. Too high to feel sporty, but not enough ground clearance to take down a trail. Even the luxury market is now full of single-car solutions. SUVs like the BMW X5M exist because it's cheaper than getting an X5 and an M2. And also because the X5 and the M2 themselves are compromises. In fact, one of the only cars that has resisted this change is the Mazda Miata. The ethos of the original MX-5 was to be a lightweight, two-seater rear-wheel drive roadster, and as generations passed, it began to get heavier. But with the introduction of the current ND, Mazda actually made it smaller and lighter to target the weight and relative price point of the original, with very little regard for how it would handle a grocery run. The MX-5 is one half of a two-car solution in a world where most people can't afford to do that. And I think this might be the second half. Like the Miata, the Grenadier is designed with a single purpose in mind, and that is to be a classic and capable off-road vehicle. Aside from the Grenadier's basic mechanical layout, one of the most unique things about it is the way it was designed to be modified. It's an overlander's dream, honestly. Buyers can opt for an auxiliary electrical system with dedicated pre-installed switches mounted overhead in the vehicle's cabin. These are linked to a series of pre-installed Deutsch connectors placed around the exterior of the vehicle. Plus, the Grenadier's bumper is made in 3 pieces, so you don't have to change out the whole thing. There are also lots of modular mounting points for accessories built into the Grenadier around the roof and, if optioned, on the doors. Try adding all of that electrical equipment to a brand new Defender and see how long it takes your Land Rover dealer to disown you. Or for the thing to just stop working. Automotive journalists, have had annoyingly different opinions on the Grenadier, but almost all their criticisms stem from it being judged as a single car solution, because that's how we're trained to look at every car today. And that's completely missing the point. The fact that its steering doesn't fully return to center is weird and can be pretty off-putting at first if you're not expecting it, but that makes the steering much more precise on rocky terrain. The not that great on-road ride is another criticism, and I'm sure I would get tired of it on a long road trip, but the reason its pavement performance is mediocre is because the solid axles give this truck better articulation and grip than independent suspension ever could. If something is built for a single purpose like off-roading, why judge it on anything else? Loving a Grenadier is really all about managing expectations. It's not gonna carve up a mountain road like a Cayenne. It's not gonna soak up speed bumps like a Range Rover. It's gonna do what it does best: crush trails. So can you use a Grenadier every day as your only car? Absolutely. Car enthusiasts do this all the time. We'll daily anything from a 30-year-old Wrangler to an S2000 to an old Super Beetle, because we love the car for what it is more than we miss what it isn't. Most people who buy a Grenadier will probably use it as a daily driver, because unfortunately, that's the reality of owning a vehicle for most people. So the Grenadier asks you to be the one to make some compromises, because it isn't gonna. With so many vehicle manufacturers focused on going solely to electric powertrains and packing their vehicles with as much technology as possible, a company that goes against that current is worth paying attention to. Ineos claims to be building the Grenadier to last for decades, Yet another thing that sets them apart from basically any other company today. A company that's dead set on building enthusiast vehicles with little to no concessions to the mass market is exciting. If Ineos can be reasonably successful selling an $80,000 SUV, maybe its next vehicle can be cheaper, opening it up to even more enthusiasts. Ultimately, the Ineos Grenadier is one big experiment. Can something so anachronistic, so Spartan, and so specialized survive in a world where cars need to be so much to so many people? You don't need to want to buy one or even like the thing to see it as a canary in the coal mine for enthusiast vehicles for years to come. The takeaway is this: not every car, truck, or SUV needs to do all of the things. I mean, that thinking is what got us to where the car industry is today. All these middling milquetoast penalty boxes we're constantly dodging in traffic. That thinking is what got us the Mitsubishi Outlander and the Nissan Rogue. Sure, the Ineos sucks at a lot of things, but that's more than okay. Actually, it's fantastic. It's not bland, it's not boring, it's certainly not like anything else on the road or off of it. It's one hell of a second or third car, or if you're a thinking man like me, your only car, and that is what we should love about it. Thanks for watching.